Hello, everybody. A few days ago, I posted a question online about the kinds of things people run across in their grocery shopping trips that make them stop and think, what the heck is that? And what am I supposed to do with it? I got some good suggestions, but the one that really caught my eye was from a high school classmate who said she was curious about sumac. She had had it before, but didn't really know what it was or what it was supposed to do, what role it actually plays in cooking. It just gets added to things. So I figure I'd start with that in a new feature that I like to call the Market of Mystery. It's almost Halloween, so I'm kind of in a mood. Anyway, admittedly, I was actually in the same boat as my classmate. I'd seen this red powder sprinkled on my store-bought hummus, so technically I have also had sumac before, but I didn't know much about it and hadn't really worked with it before.
Sumac is a bushy plant in the genus Rhus that grows in temperate regions of Asia, Africa, and North America. It grows in dense clusters of red drupes that have been used for centuries in Middle Eastern and Mediterranean cuisines, and medicinally in North America. Don't confuse it with its nastier cousins, the poison sumac, oak, and ivy, which have been reclassified in the genus Toxicodendron. They look similar, but typically have white berries, though occasionally they are red, and are definitely not good eating. Be safe and just get yours from a reputable spice merchant or from someone who knows what to look for. If you absolutely insist on going out and foraging for yourself, just remember to look at the ends of the branches and think, leaflets 3, let it be. Berries white, a poisonous sight. But seriously, just buy yours from the store. $4 will get you way more than you'll need all month, if not all year. Sumac berries, remember they're really drupes, are typically dried and ground into a powder and have a tart, almost lemony flavor that borders on bitter. It is especially useful if you want to add a sour, citrus note to a dish without watering it down with actual lemon juice. It's traditionally used as a finishing seasoning to things like hummus, some salads, or added to rice or atop kebabs. In parts of the Middle East, sumac is combined with sesame seeds, salt, and hyssop leaves to create a condiment known as za'atar, which is then used to flavor oil for dipping bread or pita, or sprinkling on meats and vegetables, or incorporated into soft spreadable cheeses like labneh. In Oman, they even steep za'atar in boiling water to make an herbal tea. Hyssop leaves are sometimes available at a good spice shop or herbalist, but in a pinch, you can substitute oregano. They're in the same taxonomic family and both bring a green herbal flavor to the spice mix. No, it won't exactly be the same, but it'll get you in the neighborhood if that's what you've got to work with, like I do. So here's how you make za'atar with oregano and sumac. Oh, before we get started on the za'atar, I should point out I have two grinders, electric grinders like this in my kitchen. One specifically for coffee and one for grinding spices. Now, while a few particles of one spice is probably not going to throw off the taste of a recipe if it gets mixed in with another spice mix, and while a few grains of breakfast blend will not ruin a pot of French roast, I think it's fair to say that fennel seed or Szechuan peppercorns are probably not what I want in my morning cup of joe, so I try to keep these two grinders segregated. I label one specifically for spices and let it only be used for spices. So now my za'atar mix starts off with 1 tablespoon of sumac berries, and to that I add 1 tablespoon of sesame seeds, 1 tablespoon of cumin. I just happen to have ground cumin. I'm just going to use this to mix them in. And finally, 1 tablespoon of dried oregano. Obviously, if you can get hyssop leaves, that'd be great, but if you can't, oregano will do. Grind for about 30 seconds or until it's into a fine powder. And place into a storage container of your choice. Add 1 teaspoon of kosher salt and 1 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. And shake to combine. Kept in a nice airtight container. This should last you for about 6 months.
So based on what we've learned about sumac so far, I've dug up a few recipes that I think can highlight what you can do with it, and by extension what you can do with za'atar. Again, because it's got a tart, lemony flavor, you can add it to just about anything to give it that citrusy zing, without either watering it down or introducing acid like lemon juice would do. So tonight, I'm going to use sumac 3 ways to make a delicious dinner for 2. A roasted quarter chicken with a herbal tahini sauce. I'm going to make a sweet potato baba ganoush with a side of pita bread. And for dessert, a Greek yogurt parfait with sumac, berries, and rose syrup. So I better get to work.
First thing we're going to start on is the herb tahini sauce for the chicken. Now, the herb in question is a flat leaf parsley or Italian parsley, and I'm adding about a cup's worth of flat leaf parsley. To that, I'm adding 1/2 cup of tahini. It's a ground sesame paste, available in most megamarts. You might find it in the ethnic food section, if not next to the peanut butter. To that, I'm adding 1 tablespoon of minced garlic. I'm putting a lot in just because I like garlic. You can choose to put less if you like. And also adding about a 1/4 cup of fresh lemon juice. And finally, a little bit, I call it 3/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt. Then lid up and process until it's a smooth paste. If necessary, you can add a little bit of water to this. I didn't because there was a lot of water still clinging to the parsley after washing it. You want this to be kind of a thin mayonnaise when it's all done processing. Transfer to an airtight container and refrigerate. You can do this ahead of time if you like, but I really wouldn't do it more than 2 days ahead. Next, we prepare to marinate the chicken. Now, I've got a 1-gallon freezer bag here, and I've folded back the edge so that it'll hold it open, and I've got it sitting in a bowl just for support. I just happen to have some chicken left over from another recipe. I've got a couple of hindquarters, and I think I've got a chicken breast here that I can stick in. To that, I'm adding, now in this case I had really small lemons, so if you have a large lemon, 1 large lemon or 2 small ones sliced. And again, another tablespoon of garlic, tablespoon of ground sumac, 1.5 teaspoons of ground allspice, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1 cup of chicken broth, and a 1/4 cup of olive oil. Seal up the bag. Don't forget to refold the edges back over. And try and evacuate as much of the air out of the bag as possible while you're zipping it shut, and then seal it. This sort of helps to make sure that the marinade gets all the way around the meat and there isn't an air pocket where there's just dry meat at the top. Then just work it around and place that bag in the bowl into the refrigerator for about 2 hours. That way, if there's any leaks in the bag, it won't end up all over the fridge. Once the chicken is marinated for 2 hours, take it out of the marinade and put it onto a roasting pan or baking sheet. I happen to have a Silpat on mine because I really like Silpats. If you don't have a silicone sheet, then just liberally rub it down with oil. I'm arranging the lemon slices around the chicken on the pan. They're going to roast with them. They're going to be part of the garnish. Now you notice I didn't pull the chicken breast out, or I did, I set it aside, but because the legs are going to take a little longer to cook, I'm going to give them a 15-minute head start. You'll also notice I poured some of the marinade on top of the chicken, It's just going to kind of stew in that as it roasts. So I'm going to stick it into a 400 degree oven that I've preheated. By the way, did I mention that? Preheat the oven to 400 degrees. I'm going to roast them for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to throw the chicken breasts onto the pan and roast the whole thing for another 30 for a total of 45 minutes. Ooh, almost forgot. Before it goes into the oven, sprinkle with a couple teaspoons of the za'atar spice mix that you made up. While the chicken is roasting, we can turn our attention to the sweet potato baba ganoush. In the bowl of a large food processor, put 2 pounds of cooked, peeled sweet potato. Any variety you like is fine. To that, add 3 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice. I'm putting about a little more than a teaspoon of minced garlic, 2 tablespoons of tahini, kosher salt, about a half teaspoon. And if you like, you can put black pepper in here too. I chose to wait until later. And process while adding about a 1/4 cup of olive oil. And process until smooth. It may require you to stop and scrape down the sides a few times, and this will take a little while. Once that's processed, transfer into a bowl, cover with plastic wrap, and refrigerate. Now is a good time to contemplate our dessert. So in a small saucepan, I've just got a 1/2 cup of water and a 1/2 cup of sugar. I'm just going to heat this over a medium heat until the sugar dissolves and it just starts to simmer, but you don't really want it to boil. And to that, I add a 1/2 cup of dried berries and a 1/2 cup of rose petals. And I'm just going to stir to make sure that they all get good and soaked with this sugar syrup. And then I'm going to turn the heat off and just let them steep for a while, about 10-15 minutes. And look at that, 45 minutes has passed in just the blink of an eye, and here's our lovely chicken. For plating, I'm going to take some of my sweet potato baba ganoush, put it in a lovely bowl, and make a depression in the center with the spoon. In the depression, I'm going to pool a little bit of olive oil, and I'm going to sprinkle some of the ground sumac berries over the top. If you prefer, you could substitute sesame oil for the olive oil. That would be good too. Arrange some wedges of pita bread on the side for dipping. This is pretty thick, so it's not a bad idea to include a spoon or a small knife for spreading. Then arrange the chicken on the plate, along with a few of the lemon slices as garnish. These are edible. It's the diner's choice as to whether they actually eat it. And then spoon some of the herb tahini sauce on top. Dinner was so delicious we snarfed it down just like that, so suddenly it's time for dessert. Place about a cup worth of Greek yogurt into a dessert bowl and drizzle about a teaspoon worth of good honey on top of that. Sprinkle about a 1/2 teaspoon of sumac over that. And then spoon some of the sugar syrup with berries and rose petals on top of that. Now, I think the British would call this affectionately call this dessert a mess. They actually have desserts like that.
So the chicken was pretty much perfect, though I probably should have added a bit more water to the tahini sauce because it set up a little too thick in the refrigerator. Or I suppose I could have heated it a few seconds in the microwave to kind of loosen it up. But otherwise, flavor-wise, it was great. I think the baba ganoush was good. Chris thought it tasted basically just like mashed sweet potato to her, so maybe a bit more tahini and lemon juice would have helped. The dessert needs work. I think what would help is if I mixed the sumac into the yogurt and then dropped that into a couple layers of cheesecloth, wrapped it up, and left it in the fridge in a strainer overnight to let some of the whey drain out. And basically, I'm making labneh, or it's a fresh cheese. Then turn that onto a plate, or I suppose I could mold it if necessary, make it into some nice shape. But turn that out onto a plate, garnish with fresh berries. It really, honestly, would be better. Little bit drizzle of honey. Maybe if you feel like gilding the lily, some toasted chopped pistachio nuts would be good. And then with the rose, I think the rose syrup was a good idea still. But what you do is just like before: half cup of sugar, half cup of water. Bring that to a simmer until the sugar completely dissolves. Add your rose petals. Let that and then let that steep for a while. Turn it off and let it steep. And then after about 10 minutes of steeping, strain out all of the rose petals, take them and spread them out onto a clean towel and let them dry. And what'll happen is the rose petals will actually crystallize. That sugar will crystallize on them, and you'll have crystallized rose petals. Then you can take a few of those. Mind you, this is ahead of time. You can use a few of those petals to garnish the top of your fresh Greek yogurt, fresh cheese. And then with the syrup that's left behind, put that back on the stove, bring it back up to a boil, just a light boil, and just let it simmer for about another minute or two. Remember, it was only half cup of water, half cup of sugar, so you don't have to boil it for very long. Just until it reduces down and becomes basically a rose caramel, sort of. You don't want to take it too far in the caramel direction, but just so it reduces down to a thicker syrup, and just drizzle that on top. That way it doesn't get soupy and you don't have a mouthful of rose petals. So, okay, you live and learn. But I think that would be a much better dessert that way. Some other uses I've heard for sumac include putting it in chocolate ganache, which balances the sweetness of the chocolate and the dairy notes from the cream without overpowering anything. You sort of cuts through the richness of it and just gives you that real true chocolatey flavor. With other desserts, it adds a tanginess that, again, cuts through what otherwise would be cloyingly sweet. So things like glazed or frosted baked goods. In the summer, sprinkle a little bit on freshly cut melon to give the fruit a bit of an earthier tone. Again, with things you don't want a lot of extra moisture, it can still bring that citrusy zing. So it's actually good for fried fish. I've even heard of people who put it on popcorn. So there you have it, a few uses for sumac. I recommend getting some from your local spice shop and experimenting a little bit to kick up your Mediterranean dishes, salads, or even your weekend barbecue or your desserts. It's definitely not just for hummus. Thanks for watching, and if you have any suggestions for other ingredients from the market of mystery that I can investigate for you here, please leave them in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe below this video as well. Until next time, this is Mike Uyak for Recipe Redemption, and I bid you good eating.